It was the winter of 1936, and the small home was heavy with the scent of antiseptic and despair. A mother sat at the bedside of her frail young boy, her hands wrapped around his, willing life back into them. His body was gaunt, his skin pale, and his breathing shallow, each inhale sounding like a struggle against something far greater than illness. Weeks earlier, the first symptoms had seemed harmless, a little fatigue, a loss of appetite, but they had rapidly spiraled into something far more devastating. The doctors had been in and out, bringing with them bottles of medicine, syringes, and furrowed brows. After every attempt, the verdict was the same: there was nothing more to be done. The child could neither walk nor speak, his muscles were limp, and his eyes, once so full of curiosity, were dulled by the shadow of a sickness no one could name. The nights were the hardest. The mother would hear the tick of the clock echo in the silence, the hours stretching endlessly as she listened to her child's uneven breaths. She had prayed until her voice was raw, begged heaven for some kind of sign, and then, in what she would later describe as a moment of divine intervention, a strange suggestion came, something no physician had recommended. It was deceptively simple: prepare a warm bath, add a specific type of salt, and immerse the boy in it daily for 3 days. She was told that the salt must not be ordinary table salt, but sea salt from a particular source, and that it should be dissolved until the water felt almost alive under her hands. She hesitated at first. How could something so simple succeed where modern medicine had failed? But desperation has a way of breaking down doubt, and so she found the salt, heated the water, and followed the instructions exactly as they were given. The moment she lowered her son into the bath, she noticed something strange. The tension in his body seemed to ease. His shallow breaths deepened slightly, as if some invisible weight had been lifted, if only for a moment. She stayed with him, pouring the salt water gently over his head, whispering quiet words of love, as though the water could carry them into his bones. On the second day, she saw color return to his cheeks. His fingers twitched, not in the restless spasms of sickness, but in deliberate movement. That night, she dared to hope, though fear still clung to her like a shadow. By the third day, the miracle unfolded. As she prepared the bath once more, the boy, who had been silent for weeks, looked at her and spoke a single word: "Mama." Tears filled her eyes as she helped him into the water, her hands trembling as she poured it over him. Later that afternoon, he stood on his own. By evening, he was walking through the halls of their home, the sound of his laughter ringing like church bells on a quiet morning. No one could explain it. The doctors were baffled, their medical notes filled with words like spontaneous remission and unexplainable recovery. But the mother knew in her heart that something deeper had happened. This was not merely a matter of muscle and bone mending themselves. It was as if her son's very essence had been called back from somewhere far away, as though the salt had unlocked a door between life and death, and she had been there to hold it open. In the days that followed, she found herself wondering about the nature of this simple substance. Salt had always been part of their lives, sitting in a jar in the kitchen, sprinkled on food without a second thought, yet now, it carried a different weight in her mind. This was not the coarse granules she kept in a tin for cooking. This was something alive, something that seemed to hum with an energy she could not name. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that salt had been part of human history for as long as anyone could remember, used in preservation, purification, and even sacred rituals. Ancient texts spoke of it as a covenant, a binding agent between the divine and humanity. Could it be that its true purpose had been forgotten, hidden under centuries of ordinary use? She began to research, driven by an insatiable curiosity. Everywhere she looked, salt appeared not only as a necessity for the body, but as a bridge to something beyond the physical. In Scripture, it was called the salt of the earth, a phrase she had always thought of as metaphorical, but now it felt like a literal truth disguised as poetry. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Salt was more than a mineral, it was a key. A crystalline archive holding patterns older than time, a material that seemed to carry within it the very memory of creation itself. Looking back, she wondered if the bath had done more than cleanse her son's skin or ease his muscles. Perhaps it had reminded his body of its original blueprint, the divine pattern it was born with, untarnished by illness or fear. It was as though the salt had whispered to his cells, calling them to remember their purpose, to realign with the harmony they were made for, and he had answered. The memory of those 3 days never faded. It became a kind of touchstone for her, a reminder that the most extraordinary answers are often hidden in the simplest places. She began to keep salt in her home, not just for seasoning, but for blessing, a pinch in water before a prayer, a small bowl near the bed during illness. She treated it not as a condiment, but as a sacred tool, a quiet companion in the unseen work of the soul. Word of her son's recovery spread, whispered from neighbor to neighbor, told with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others leaned in, asking for the exact details, their eyes betraying a hope they could not hide. She would tell them everything, the type of salt, the way the water should be warmed, the gentleness of the ritual, but she knew that the physical act was only part of the mystery. The salt was a vessel, yes, but the true power came from the intention behind it, the unshakable faith that something greater was at work. Years later, when her son was grown and strong, she would still catch herself staring at the small jar of salt in her kitchen with a sense of reverence. To anyone else, it might look like an ordinary jar, but to her, it was the reminder of a miracle. A reminder that the boundary between the physical and the spiritual is far thinner than we are taught to believe, and sometimes all it takes to cross it is a handful of crystals dissolved in water, carrying with them the memory of something eternal. You've been told your whole life that salt is just a seasoning, a simple mineral you sprinkle on your food to make it taste better. Maybe you've even been warned about it, told to cut back, to watch your intake, to treat it as nothing more than a mundane part of your kitchen cabinet. And yet, that tiny white crystal sitting quietly in a jar has been carrying a secret so ancient, so profound, that entire civilizations once guarded it as if their survival depended on it, because it did. Somewhere along the way, in the shift from sacred understanding to industrial convenience, we forgot. We reduced salt to a condiment, stripping it of its true story, its spiritual resonance, its role as one of the most powerful bridges between the physical world and the unseen. Pause for a moment and imagine this. What if every grain of salt was more than just sodium chloride? What if each crystal was a piece of the original code of creation, a microcosm of divine intention, crystallized into form? What if, when you touched it, tasted it, dissolved it, you were interacting with something that had been part of Earth's sacred memory since the dawn of time? This isn't a metaphor meant to sound poetic. This is literal. Salt has been called the crystallized divine memory of life itself, a solid, tangible blueprint of the vibrational essence that shaped reality into being. You see, in the natural world, salt is not created in a laboratory. It is born from oceans, forged in ancient seabeds, and shaped by geological forces over thousands, sometimes millions, of years. It has absorbed the pulse of tides, the hum of planetary rhythms, the subtle currents of the moon's pull on the waters. In every speck, there's a silent record of those patterns, like a cosmic library condensed into something you can hold between your fingers. And yet, when you reach for it, you've probably never thought of it that way. You've probably thought of it as seasoning for your dinner. But to those who knew, salt was never just a flavor enhancer. It was a key. There's a reason ancient cultures traded salt as if it were gold, a reason it was offered in temples and sealed in tombs. Salt was a contract between humanity and the divine, a physical reminder of the covenant between earth and the heavens. In its crystalline form, it holds structure, and structure holds memory. Not the kind of memory stored in your brain, but vibrational memory, the echo of original creation, frozen in place so it could be accessed by anyone who understood how to listen. Science, in its own way, has begun to rediscover this. We now know that crystalline substances can store and transmit vast amounts of information, far more than most human-made devices can. Quartz does it, so does silicon, and salt, in its humble simplicity, is no different. When you place salt in water, it doesn't just dissolve, it releases. Its structure unbinds, and with that unbinding, it shares the vibrational patterns it has been carrying. If your intention is pure, if your awareness is focused, you can program that water, and in turn, your own body, with the same patterns that existed before human history began. Think about what that means for a moment. You are made mostly of water. Salt is in your blood, your tears, your sweat. It moves through you, regulating your life force, keeping you in balance. When you taste salt, you are tasting the same substance that flows through the oceans of the world, the same mineral that has been on this planet since the first seas formed. And if salt holds memory, then every time it touches your tongue, it's whispering to your cells, reminding them of something they once knew but forgot. Of course, in modern times, that sacred relationship has been diminished. We process salt until it's stripped of its trace minerals, bleach it until it glows unnaturally white, and then store it in shaker bottles next to artificial sweeteners and food coloring. But real salt, the kind drawn from ancient seabeds or sun-dried from mineral-rich waters, is alive with structure. Its crystals are still intact, still holding the subtle lattice that mirrors the sacred geometry found in nature, in snowflakes, in shells, in the spiral of galaxies. It's a geometry that is not random. It's intentional. Those who have worked with salt in a conscious way will tell you that it feels different. It hums in your hand, almost imperceptibly. Place it in water, and it changes not just the flavor but the energy. Hold it in prayer, and you can feel its weight shift, not physically, but vibrationally, as if the salt itself is aligning with your intention, ready to carry it forward. This is why rituals involving salt have existed in nearly every culture. It was never superstition, it was science of the soul. But here's the part you might not expect. This knowledge isn't about worshipping salt, it's about remembering what it represents. It is the bridge between the human body and the divine blueprint. It's a way of syncing your physical form with the higher frequencies that guide your purpose. When you consume it with intention, when you bless it, when you place it in water or in the spaces you inhabit, you are, in a very real sense, tuning yourself to the original frequency of creation. And maybe you've felt this before without realizing it. Have you ever noticed how the air feels different near the ocean? That subtle sense of clarity, of lightness, of expansion in your chest? Part of that comes from the negative ions in the air, but part of it is the salt. You are breathing in microscopic crystals, each one carrying that ancient vibrational memory. It clears you, not just physically, but energetically. It's the same reason tears can be healing. When you cry from deep joy or deep release, your body is producing salt water that is charged with the energy of your emotions. In those moments, you are literally cleansing yourself from the inside out. It's worth asking yourself, what else in your life have you mistaken for something ordinary when, in truth, it was extraordinary all along? How many sacred tools have you overlooked because they seemed too simple? Salt doesn't shout for your attention. It doesn't demand worship. It simply waits, quietly, for you to remember. And when you do, you begin to understand why it has been woven into spiritual language for millennia, why it was considered worthy of sacred offerings, why it was once a symbol of loyalty, purity, and eternal truth. So the next time you see salt, don't see it as something that belongs only in your kitchen. See it as the crystallized memory of the earth itself, a living link to the moment this world took form. A key you can hold in your hand, one that was left for you to find, not in some hidden chamber or ancient scroll, but in the most ordinary place you could imagine. Because sometimes, the greatest truths are hidden in plain sight, and this one has been waiting for you all along. In the quiet moments of reflection, when ancient words echo through the corridors of time, there is a passage that has puzzled both the devout and the scholarly for centuries. You are the salt of the earth. It is short, almost deceptively so, and yet it carries a weight that refuses to fade with the turning of the ages. To most, it has been read as poetry, a figure of speech meant to inspire moral character or steadfastness. But what if it was never meant as a metaphor at all? What if it was a statement of spiritual technology, a declaration that pointed to something tangible, physical, and essential, hidden within the human form and the natural world? Salt appears in sacred texts more than 35 times, and never as a casual detail. It is woven into covenants, offered in temple sacrifices, used to seal agreements that could not be broken. In the book of Leviticus, every grain offering was to be seasoned with salt, so that the salt of the covenant of your God shall not be lacking. This was not seasoning for taste. It was a command to include a material that symbolized something enduring and incorruptible. Salt was not simply an additive, it was a preservative of divine intention, an earthly mirror of something eternal. In the Chronicles of Numbers, there is mention of a covenant of salt as a perpetual agreement, binding as the laws of heaven themselves. Again and again, salt emerges in Scripture as the silent witness to sacred promises. To the ancient mind, salt was not ordinary, it was precious, not merely because it preserved food in an age before refrigeration, but because it was understood to hold within it the quality of permanence. It resisted decay, it kept what was pure from spoiling, and so, when it appeared in spiritual contexts, it was always as a sign of something meant to last beyond the reach of time. It was as though salt's incorruptible nature was a signature of the divine, a crystalline reminder of the unchanging amidst a world of constant change. When those words were first spoken on a hillside in Galilee, to a group of followers who hung on every syllable, they would have carried this weight of meaning. To be called the salt of the earth was not to be compared to a seasoning for flavor, but to be identified as a living preservative of divine truth, an anchor for the eternal covenant between the Creator and creation. It was a call to embody the same incorruptible essence that salt symbolized, to carry it in every breath and every act. But there is another layer to this statement, one that moves beyond symbolism and into the realm of the literal. Ancient spiritual knowledge often carried multiple meanings, one for the crowd and another for the initiate. To those who had eyes to see and ears to hear, salt of the earth was not just a poetic label but a revelation about the human body itself. Within each of us, salt exists as a vital component, flowing in our blood, carried in our tears, suspended in the fluid that cushions our brain and spinal cord. Life, as we know it, depends on the delicate balance of these salts. Disrupt that balance, and the connection between mind, body, and spirit begins to fray. Maintain it, and the body becomes a more perfect vessel for consciousness. The ancients understood that salt was more than a nutrient, it was a conductor. It carried signals, bridged gaps, and facilitated connection between the physical and the unseen. When spoken of in the sacred texts, it was not merely as a metaphor for moral purity, but as a key to maintaining spiritual communication while walking in the physical world. The very act of calling a disciple salt of the earth could have been an affirmation that their role was to hold this connection steady, to remain attuned to the divine current flowing through creation, just as salt in the body allows the nervous system to carry its messages without interruption. Consider the temple offerings seasoned with salt. The physical act of adding it to the sacrifice may have had more than symbolic purpose. Blessed, prayed over, and consumed in the fire, it could have been a way of releasing a certain vibration into the space, one that anchored the ceremony to its heavenly counterpart. In the same way, those who understood how to use salt consciously could align their own bodies to act as living temples, resonating with the covenant they carried within. In the ancient Near East, travelers sometimes carried small pouches of salt, not for cooking, but for sealing agreements. To share salt with another person was to enter into a pact that could not be broken without dishonor. Even today, remnants of this tradition linger in certain cultures, where offering bread and salt to a guest is a sign of welcome and protection. The biblical covenant of salt was not a one-time gesture, but an enduring relationship, a recognition that some bonds are as unyielding as the crystals that formed them. When viewed through this lens, the repeated references to salt in the scriptures begin to form a pattern. It is always present at the points where heaven and earth meet, in offerings, in covenants, in the anointing of a people set apart. It is there to signify what is uncorrupted, but also to function as a literal agent of preservation for the connection itself. It is both symbol and tool, language and technology. The words spoken on that hillside, then, could be understood as a reminder of identity. To be the salt of the earth is to be both guardian and channel, to preserve the memory of divine truth in a world where forgetfulness is common, and to keep open the lines of communication between the Creator and creation. It is to embody the very qualities of salt itself: purity, endurance, and the ability to carry a charge, to bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen. This was knowledge that would have been dangerous to lose. Over time, as teachings were translated and reinterpreted, the deeper meanings faded from common understanding. The practical, vibrational role of salt was reduced to metaphor, its connection to the living body and the living covenant largely forgotten. Yet the words remain, as if waiting for those who would hear them again in their fullness. If salt loses its savor, the passage warns, it is good for nothing and will be cast out. On the surface, this is a warning about losing one's moral integrity. Beneath the surface, it could just as easily be an instruction about maintaining the vibrational potency of the salt within the body, keeping the connection pure, ensuring that the inner covenant is not corrupted by neglect or imbalance. For once, salt's purpose is forgotten, its power is lost, and with it, the clarity of the bond it represents. Salt in the sacred texts is not there by accident. It is a thread woven through the tapestry of spiritual law, binding the physical and the divine in ways that modern minds are only beginning to rediscover. Each mention is a marker, pointing back to a truth that is both as simple as a pinch of crystals and as vast as eternity. To see it only as metaphor is to miss the invitation it carries, to remember that you, too, are meant to be the salt of the earth, preserving and transmitting the essence of the covenant you were born to carry. And perhaps, in reclaiming that truth, you also reclaim the bridge it offers, a bridge made of something so small and so ordinary, and yet holding within it the memory of the infinite. Imagine for a moment that the smallest grain of salt you've ever seen is not just a particle of matter, but a living archive. Not a dead, inert speck, but a carrier of a message so ancient that it predates all languages, all civilizations, even the earliest stirrings of human memory. Inside its crystalline structure is a code, an intricate, silent prayer, woven into the very geometry of its being. This is not prayer as you've been taught to think of it, not words spoken aloud or whispered in the quiet of your mind, but something more fundamental, something embedded into the very atoms themselves. These atomic prayers are not constructed in sentences or symbols. They are pure vibration, patterned energy that holds intention the way a seed holds the blueprint for an entire tree. These atomic prayers are universal, not bound by the confines of any single religion or spiritual tradition. They don't belong to any one culture, but to life itself. They are the original language, the hum of creation, and salt is one of their most faithful scribes. Each crystal forms with a precision that mirrors the sacred geometry seen in snowflakes, honeycombs, and spiral shells. These patterns are not random. They are the signature of the intelligence that shaped the cosmos, the same intelligence that holds galaxies in place and guides the unfolding of a flower. The lattice of a salt crystal is a miniature of this divine architecture, a physical echo of the greater blueprint. When you hold salt in your hand, you are holding the physical embodiment of order, balance, and memory. Every angle, every plane of its crystalline form reflects a geometric perfection that resonates with the patterns found in the Akashic records, that timeless field said to contain the story of every soul, every thought, and every event that has ever occurred. Just as the Akashic records are a living archive of spiritual history, the crystal lattice of salt is a living archive of vibrational intention. It is as if each crystal is a page in a vast, multidimensional book, and every page is inscribed with the memory of creation itself. The connection between salt's structure and the Akashic records is not mere poetry. Think of the records as an infinite web of interwoven patterns, each thread a path of information, each intersection a point of knowing. The crystalline form of salt mirrors this architecture in miniature. The way its molecules bond together into a repeating, harmonious grid is like the physical counterpart of the record's energetic grid. This is why salt has been used in countless spiritual traditions as a tool for alignment, purification, and connection. It resonates with the very matrix of existence, and by engaging with it, you are tuning yourself to that frequency. Science, though it uses different language, hints at the same truth. Crystals can store information. In the modern world, we use silicon to hold the memory of computers, quartz to regulate time in watches, and other crystalline substances to preserve and transmit vast amounts of data. Salt, humble and overlooked, is no different. It can hold and transmit the energy of intention, not just physical energy, but the subtle, unseen energy that flows from thought, emotion, and prayer. When salt is blessed, when it is infused with mindful intent, its lattice shifts in ways that carry that intent forward, like a vessel holding a sacred charge until it is released. The term atomic prayers speaks to this truth. Imagine a frequency so precise that it imprints itself into the smallest units of matter. That imprint becomes part of the structure itself. This is why salt in its pure, unrefined form can feel so alive in the hand, and why salt that has been overly processed or chemically treated feels somehow empty. When we strip salt of its natural complexity, we strip away much of its vibrational memory, its prayers dissolved into nothing more than a sterile mineral. But in its whole form, harvested from living seas or ancient beds, those atomic prayers remain intact, waiting for someone who knows how to listen. To listen to salt is not a literal act. It's not about putting it to your ear, but about engaging with it in a state of heightened awareness. You can sit with a pinch of salt between your fingers, close your eyes, and simply feel. If you are still enough, you might sense a subtle hum, not as sound but as presence, a quiet intelligence that carries both simplicity and depth. In that moment, you are not imagining something that isn't there. You are touching an ancient dialogue, one that has been ongoing since the first oceans formed, since the first crystals settled from evaporating seas. The Akashic records, as mystics describe them, are accessed not through force but through resonance. The more your own vibration matches the patterns of the records, the more easily you can perceive them. Salt, with its sacred geometry, acts like a tuning fork for this resonance. It helps to bridge the dense, material frequency of the physical body with the finer, more expansive frequency of the records. This is why in certain meditative practices, holding or even placing salt nearby can deepen the sense of clarity, focus, and connection to higher wisdom. Consider for a moment the ancient ritual of offering salt in temples or placing it in sacred spaces. On the surface, it might seem symbolic, a gesture of purity or preservation. But beneath the symbolism is something far more practical. By introducing salt into a space, you are introducing a geometric pattern that harmonizes and aligns energy. You are placing a piece of matter whose atomic prayers resonate with the structure of the cosmos itself. This is not superstition, it is a conscious act of tuning a space to the frequency of the divine blueprint. The divine blueprint, that is the key. It is the original pattern upon which all life is based, the universal design that guides the unfolding of creation. Salt's crystalline form is a direct reflection of that design. This is why, when you consume salt that has been consciously prepared, you are not merely ingesting a mineral. You are bringing into your body a tangible fragment of that blueprint. Your cells, themselves structured and ordered, respond to this harmony. They recognize it, because they too are expressions of the same cosmic design. The beauty of this truth is its accessibility. You don't have to climb a mountain or enter a hidden monastery to engage with it. You don't have to decode ancient texts or wait for some rare celestial alignment. You can begin with something as simple as holding a crystal of salt, becoming aware of its perfection, and acknowledging that perfection as part of yourself. In that recognition, you are not only remembering the blueprint, you are aligning with it. The atomic prayers held within salt are constant, unwavering. They do not change with trends or fade with time. They are as present today as they were in the depths of prehistory. And when you allow yourself to be still enough to feel them, they can shift something within you, a subtle reminder that you are not separate from the universe, but an expression of it. That your own body, mind, and spirit are shaped by the same patterns, held by the same geometry, and connected to the same eternal archive that salt has mirrored for eons. In the end, the question is not whether salt holds these prayers, but whether you will choose to hear them. Because once you do, you'll never look at those tiny crystals in the same way again. You'll understand that they are not just for flavor, not just for preservation, but for remembrance. They are the silent ambassadors of a truth so vast it could fill the heavens, yet so small it can rest on the tip of your tongue. There are moments in life when you feel fully present, clear, and connected, when every thought, every breath, seems to flow effortlessly from a deeper place inside you. And then there are other times when something feels off, as if your inner compass has lost its calibration. You might still go about your daily routines, speaking, moving, making decisions, but underneath it all, there is a faint hum of disconnection. It is not the kind of disconnection you can fix with a phone call or a conversation. It is deeper, a sense that some invisible line between your inner self and the greater source of your being has become frayed. This is what the ancients might have called soul static, the subtle interference that clouds the signal between your human awareness and your divine consciousness. To understand why salt plays a role in this, you first have to see it as more than a dietary necessity. Yes, salt keeps your body alive in the most practical way, regulating hydration, nerve signals, and muscle function. But its role extends beyond the body's mechanics. It is also one of the body's most ancient spiritual tools, a crystalline bridge between the physical and the unseen. For those attuned to higher levels of awareness, this bridge is essential. Without it, you risk drifting away from the very source that animates and guides you. Think about the nature of salt for a moment. In its simplest form, it is a crystalline structure capable of holding energy and transmitting it without distortion. In the body, it dissolves into ions that move through every cell, carrying electrical charges and messages. Your nervous system runs on these currents. Every thought, every emotion, every act of will is carried on a wave of electrical signals made possible by the presence of salt in your system. And if those ratios are imbalanced, too little or too much, the system falters. Messages get scrambled, the mind becomes foggy, the heart feels distant from its own truth. This is not just a physical disruption, it is a spiritual one. For advanced souls, those who came into this life carrying a higher degree of awareness, the balance of salt in the body becomes even more important. The physical body is, in many ways, a filter. It grounds your consciousness in the physical plane, giving you a vehicle to interact with the tangible world. But the more refined your awareness, the more you need a stable anchor to keep the connection between your divine mind and your human brain steady. Salt fulfills this role. It is both grounding and conductive, able to root you in the body, while allowing the higher frequencies of your soul to flow through you without distortion. When the salt balance in your body is correct, it acts like a perfectly tuned antenna. You receive the guidance you need, not in vague impressions, but in clear knowing. You feel aligned, in step with the rhythm of something greater. The decisions you make feel certain, your intuition sharp. Even your physical senses seem heightened, colors more vivid, sounds more resonant. You are, in a very real sense, connected to your own blueprint, the divine pattern that you brought with you into this life. But when that balance is disturbed, the effect can be dramatic. Soul static creeps in like an uninvited guest, dulling your awareness. It might show up as irritability, confusion, or a feeling of being emotionally numb. You may feel as though you are moving through life without direction, unable to hear the subtle voice within that once guided you so easily. This is not a punishment or a sign of spiritual failure. It is simply the result of the connection being interrupted. The salt in your body is no longer holding the line steady between your divine consciousness and your human awareness. The signal is still there, but it is flickering, fading in and out. The ancients knew this, even if they spoke of it in different terms. In many traditions, salt was used in rituals not only for purification but for protection, not just from physical harm, but from spiritual disconnection. A pinch of blessed salt in water, a circle of salt around a sacred space, even the simple act of touching salt before a prayer, all of these were ways of reinforcing the anchor, of keeping the signal clear. They understood that the spiritual body and the physical body are not separate worlds but one interconnected system. What happens in the physical influences the spiritual, and the spiritual in turn shapes the physical. When you see salt in this light, its role as an anchor becomes clear. It is not there to hold you down, but to hold you steady, like a mooring line that keeps a ship from drifting too far from the shore. In this analogy, your higher consciousness is the shore, solid, unchanging, the place from which you draw your strength and guidance. Your human life is the ship, moving, shifting, sometimes caught in storms, sometimes floating in calm waters. The salt is the line between them. It allows movement, but prevents separation. Restoring this anchor is not about consuming massive amounts of salt indiscriminately. It is about mindful balance, about aligning the body's mineral harmony with the vibration of your inner being. This is why some spiritual traditions place such emphasis on using salt in combination with intention. When salt is blessed, prayed over, or infused with focused thought, it is said to carry that intention into every part of the body. It becomes not just a physical mineral, but a spiritual message encoded in crystalline form, reminding every cell of its original design. The difference between a body with balanced salt ratios and one without can be felt in subtle ways. You might notice that meditation becomes deeper and more expansive when the balance is right. Dreams may become more vivid and meaningful, offering insights that feel as if they come from beyond the veil. Conversations flow more easily because you are present, truly hearing the words and the emotions behind them. You are less reactive to the chaos of the world, more anchored in the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and why you are here. In times of imbalance, it can be helpful to approach salt not only as a dietary component, but as a sacred element. This might mean taking a salt bath while holding a clear intention in your mind, allowing the water to surround you, the salt to touch your skin, and your awareness to reconnect with the deeper currents of your being. It might mean dissolving a small amount of salt in water, blessing it, and drinking it slowly, imagining it clearing the static and restoring the clarity of your inner signal. These acts are not magic in the theatrical sense. They are simply ways of reminding the body and spirit to work together, to align once more. The truth is, the connection between your human self and your divine self is never truly broken. But without the right anchor, it can feel distant, almost unreachable. Salt, in its humble and ancient way, has the ability to keep that connection alive and strong. It is both the bridge and the tether, ensuring that no matter how far you wander in your daily life, you are never completely adrift. The more you understand and respect this role, the more you can use it consciously, not just to nourish the body, but to keep the soul steady, clear, and deeply connected to the source from which it came. She had been told there was nothing more that could be done. The doctors had given their final verdict, spoken in that quiet tone that carries the weight of inevitability. Her blood was failing her. The disorder was incurable, untreatable, and it was only a matter of time before her body would no longer be able to sustain her. For weeks she lay in her bed, her skin pale, her energy drained to the point where even breathing felt like labor. Friends and family came with flowers, prayers, and the kind of half-smiles people wear when they're trying to hide fear. And then, in the middle of that still, heavy atmosphere, came an unusual suggestion. It didn't involve a hospital or a pharmacy. It involved something so simple, so ordinary, that at first she almost laughed. Salt dissolved in water, blessed with intention, and accompanied by spoken affirmations. The instructions were precise. The water was to be pure, drawn fresh each morning. The salt was to be unrefined, taken from the sea, its crystals still holding the trace minerals and natural structure from which they were formed. Before it ever touched her lips, it was to be blessed, not in the abstract way people often mean when they speak of blessings, but in a deliberate act of programming, as though the salt itself was a living participant in her healing. The words she was to speak were not pleas for help, but statements of truth, spoken as if the healing had already occurred. They were affirmations of vitality, balance, and strength. The first time she prepared the mixture, she sat at her kitchen table in silence. She placed a small dish of the sea salt before her and closed her eyes. Her hands hovered above it, and she began to speak. Not to herself, and not to any invisible audience, but to the salt itself, as if she were reminding it of something it already knew. "You carry the memory of the sea," she said. "You hold the vibration of life. You are pure, whole, and aligned with the pattern of health. You will bring my body back into harmony." The words were steady, deliberate. She repeated them 3 times before lifting the salt into the water, watching it dissolve. In that moment, something subtle shifted. It wasn't visible, but she felt it, a soft hum in her palms, a quiet clarity in her chest. When she drank, it wasn't just water passing over her tongue. It felt alive, as though the liquid carried with it a kind of memory, a purposeful energy that her body recognized and welcomed. She followed the same ritual each day, never rushing, always taking a few moments to center herself before speaking the affirmations and blessing the salt. What she couldn't see was that the blessing wasn't just symbolic. Crystalline structures like salt are not passive. They have the ability to hold and transmit vibrational information, much like a flash drive holds digital data. When salt is in its natural form, its molecules are arranged in a repeating, ordered lattice, a pattern that is stable and receptive to frequency. Words, thoughts, and emotions are forms of energy, and when they are directed with intention toward a substance like salt, they can imprint that pattern with new information. In essence, she was programming the salt's vibrational field with the energy of her affirmations, and when the salt dissolved in the water, that programming transferred to the water itself. Water, too, is a remarkable carrier of information. Its molecules form clusters that can be influenced by external frequencies, including sound, light, and thought. When the blessed salt dissolved, the vibrational blueprint it held spread throughout the water, infusing it with the same intentional pattern. By drinking it, she wasn't just hydrating her body, she was ingesting a liquid that carried the precise frequency of health and balance she had programmed into it. Her body, which is mostly water, responded to this in ways that went beyond chemistry. The change didn't happen overnight. At first, the differences were subtle: a bit more energy in the morning, less fatigue when she walked across the room, a slight improvement in appetite. But as the days turned into weeks, the improvements became impossible to ignore. Her color began to return, her breathing felt easier. Blood tests that once showed alarming instability now revealed gradual normalization. Her doctors were perplexed, unable to explain the reversal, but she understood that something deeper than biology was taking place. The act of blessing the salt wasn't just about altering the substance, it was about altering herself. The ritual required her to enter a state of focused intention, to set aside fear and doubt, and to speak only of health as if it were already hers. This mental and emotional alignment was as much a part of the process as the salt and water themselves. The body listens to the mind's language, and her affirmations were reshaping the environment in which her cells functioned. She was no longer feeding them fear, she was bathing them daily in the vibration of harmony and restoration. There is a reason sacred traditions around the world have used blessed water for healing, purification, and protection. It is not the liquid alone that holds the power, but the intentional programming it receives. The blessing is the bridge between thought and matter, between the unseen and the tangible. Without it, salt and water are simply elements of the physical world. With it, they become vessels for carrying the energy of the divine blueprint. The vibrational programming of salt is unique because of its crystalline nature. A crystal's structure naturally holds order, and order is the language of creation. When you bless salt, you are essentially fine-tuning its frequency to resonate with a particular state of being. That resonance is not limited to the salt itself. It influences whatever the salt interacts with. In her case, that was the water she drank, and, ultimately, the body that absorbed it. Over the 6 weeks that followed, her recovery astonished everyone around her. The blood disorder that had once been deemed untreatable now showed no sign of active imbalance. Her energy was steady, her mood bright, her strength returning day by day. To those who looked only through the lens of conventional understanding, it was a mystery, perhaps a spontaneous remission, a rare stroke of luck, but she knew it was not luck. It was the result of reintroducing her body to the original patterns of health that had always been available to it, carried into her system by a medium that could hold and transmit those patterns perfectly. Salt, once blessed, does not easily lose its charge. Its structure is stable enough to preserve the imprint for extended periods, which is why she could prepare her mixture each morning with confidence that it was carrying the vibration she had placed into it. The blessing was not a one-way conversation. It was a partnership. She was speaking to the salt, and the salt was speaking back, quietly, in a language her body understood on a cellular level. Looking back, she realized the healing began the moment she chose to believe in the process. Not in blind faith, but in the awareness that the elements of the earth are not passive. They are participants in the dance of creation. By engaging with them consciously, with respect and intention, she had opened a doorway for transformation to occur. The salt and water were simply the medium through which that transformation moved. The story stands as a reminder that healing is not always about adding something foreign to the body. Sometimes, it is about reawakening the body's own intelligence by providing it with the right frequency, the right pattern, the right message. And sometimes, those messages are carried in the most unassuming of forms: a pinch of salt, a glass of water, and words spoken with the certainty that life responds to the language of the soul. Within the human body, there are places where the physical and the spiritual meet, places where the essence of who you are flows in forms that can be measured, touched, and yet still carry something beyond measurement. These are what can be called salt wisdom centers, points where the concentration of salt in your body is not simply a biological necessity, but a foundation for spiritual communication. They are not random or accidental. They are positioned where the human and the divine exchange information, where the unseen finds a way to speak to the seen, and where your inner life is translated into physical form. One of the most obvious of these centers is found in your tears. On the surface, tears are a natural function, the body's way of cleaning and protecting the eyes. But when you look deeper, their role is far more profound. Tears carry the highest concentration of spiritually active salt in the body. They are born from emotion, from moments of deep release, whether in grief, joy, compassion, or awe. They are not just water slipping from the corner of your eyes. They are a mineral-rich expression of your soul's language. The ancients believed that tears released during prayer or meditation contained a vibration that could carry petitions, gratitude, and even healing energy into the unseen. In this view, crying during moments of deep spiritual connection is not weakness. It is the body's way of amplifying and transmitting the frequency of the heart. Each drop becomes a vessel, holding not only salt and water, but the resonance of the moment in which it was born. Another of these centers lies deep within your skull, in the fluid that cradles your brain and travels down the length of your spine. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear liquid, enriched with precise ratios of salts, that cushions and protects the central nervous system. But beyond its physical role, it is a river of connection between the mind and the soul. The brain is the organ that processes thoughts, but it is also the receiver of intuition, insight, and inspiration. For these higher forms of communication to flow without distortion, the environment in which the brain operates must be finely tuned. The salts in cerebrospinal fluid create an electrically balanced medium that allows for the clear transmission of both physical and non-physical signals. When this balance is right, the mind becomes an open channel. Insights arrive in moments of stillness. Guidance seems to emerge from nowhere, precise and timely. The flow between your higher awareness and your waking consciousness is smooth, like a river without rocks to disturb its current. If the balance is disrupted, if the salt ratio in these wisdom centers is altered, the flow becomes turbulent. You might feel mentally scattered, emotionally unstable, or spiritually disconnected. This is not simply a matter of mood or thought patterns. It is a literal change in the body's capacity to hold and carry the signal between you and the deeper layers of your being. The disruption is what can be felt as confusion, apathy, or that strange numbness that makes life seem drained of color. When this happens, it is not that the wisdom is gone, but that the pathways for receiving it have been clouded. The body's design is not accidental. The same salt that keeps your blood pressure regulated and your muscles responsive also serves as a conductor for spiritual information. This is why salt wisdom centers are not just isolated points, they are part of a network. The tears at your eyes, the fluid in your spine, the saline balance in your blood, even the salt content in the cells of your heart muscle all work together to create a resonance that connects you to the field of consciousness you are part of. When one part of this network is functioning poorly, it affects the whole. Tears deserve particular attention because they are the most outward sign of these centers at work. People often try to hide their tears, thinking of them as evidence of vulnerability. Yet, in moments of prayer, deep gratitude, or compassion, tears are a form of sacred overflow. They release energy that the body can no longer contain, and the salt they carry crystallizes the essence of the emotion into something the world can touch. Even when they fall unseen, they do not go unnoticed. In many ancient traditions, tears shed in sincerity were thought to be gathered by the divine, becoming part of a record of the soul's journey. Cerebrospinal fluid, though hidden from view, is equally remarkable. It moves rhythmically with your breath and heartbeat, circulating nutrients and clearing waste. But in certain meditative states, its flow can shift, increasing in volume and subtly changing in composition. Practitioners of deep inner work have long described sensations of warmth, light, or expansion in the head and spine during these states. From a spiritual perspective, these sensations may be the physical perception of heightened communication through this salt-enriched medium. When the cerebrospinal fluid is in balance, the mind becomes a clearer mirror for the soul's reflection. Salt wisdom centers also highlight the intimate relationship between the emotional and the physical. Tears are triggered by emotional intensity, which in turn influences the brain and its fluid environment. A profound spiritual experience can alter the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, which can then affect the entire nervous system, shifting mood, perception, and even posture. This interplay suggests that tending to these centers is not just about hydration or nutrition, it is about creating conditions where the inner and outer can work in harmony. There is a reason why salt has been used in sacred rites for thousands of years. Its crystalline form and ability to hold and transmit energy make it a natural bridge between realms. In the body, salt wisdom centers are like tuning forks, resonating with both physical necessity and spiritual purpose. To ignore their spiritual role is to see only half the truth of their function. To care for them is to maintain the clarity of your most vital communication pathways. Tending to these centers can be as simple as honoring the moments when they speak. When tears come, allow them. Recognize that they are not just emotional release, but sacred messengers carrying something important out into the world. When you feel mental or spiritual fog, consider the health of your internal rivers. Are you nourishing them, balancing them, allowing them to carry the charge they are meant to hold? Practices like mindful hydration, intentional breathing, and meditative stillness all support these centers, not just in function but in purpose. Your body is not a random collection of systems, but an intricate instrument designed to play the music of your life. The salt wisdom centers are like keynotes in that song. They keep the harmony between your earthly experience and your eternal self. And when they are in tune, the music flows without interruption, clear, resonant, and full of the depth that comes only when the body and soul are in perfect communication. He had been gone for 8 months, though his body remained. His eyes stayed closed, his breath shallow, his mind unreachable. To the doctors, he was little more than a body in a bed, a patient in what they clinically termed a persistent vegetative state, unlikely to return. There was no sign of recognition, no flicker of awareness, no response to voice or touch. His family had spent everything they had chasing treatments, therapies, and second opinions, all leading to the same conclusion: there was nothing to be done but wait, and perhaps accept that the man they loved was never coming back. But his wife refused to let go. She had heard of a practice so unusual that it sounded almost absurd: baths prepared with a specific kind of salt, blessed with intention, and given in harmony with the cycles of the moon. She was told it could act like a spiritual magnet, drawing the soul back into the body if the connection between them had been loosened or disrupted. The instructions were unlike anything she had heard before. The salt was not to be taken from any store shelf. It had to come from a particular coastal region, known for its mineral-rich deposits and long history of sacred use. The salt was to be gathered and stored in a vessel of natural material, never plastic, never metal, to preserve its vibrational integrity. Before each bath, it was to be blessed, not with a hurried prayer, but with focused intent, the kind of deliberate, wordless communication that imprints itself into the crystalline lattice of the salt. The timing was just as important. The baths had to be aligned with the lunar cycle, each one prepared during specific phases when the moon's gravitational and energetic influence would be most supportive for calling the soul fully back into the body. On the night of the first bath, the house was quiet. His wife and sister moved slowly, speaking little, their hands steady as they prepared the water. The salt crystals shimmered faintly in the dim light, catching the glow of the waxing moon through the window. They closed their eyes and held the salt in their palms, feeling its subtle hum. They envisioned light filling each grain, carrying the memory of wholeness, the vibration of life, the magnetic pull of presence. When they were ready, they let the salt fall into the warm water, watching it dissolve as if releasing its stored energy into the bath. They lowered his body gently into the water, supporting his head and limbs, as though cradling something infinitely precious. As the salt-infused water touched his skin, it was as though an invisible current ran through the room. His wife described it later as a shift in the air, a sudden clarity, a stillness that was not empty but full, as if something vast and unseen had stepped into the space. The bath lasted for the time instructed, and when it was done, they wrapped him in soft blankets and placed him back in bed. There was no visible change that night, but they were told not to expect one immediately. The process, they were reminded, was not about forcing the body to awaken. It was about re-establishing the link between the soul and the vessel it once animated. They repeated the baths at the appointed times, each one precisely timed to the moon's phase, each one prepared with the same care and intention. With each bath, the feeling in the room seemed to grow stronger, more present. On the 7th day of the 7th bath, something happened. As his wife sat beside him, her hand resting on his, she felt the faintest twitch. His eyelids fluttered. At first it seemed like a reflex, but then his gaze shifted, not aimlessly, but toward her. His lips parted, and in a voice hoarse from months of disuse, he spoke her name. In the days that followed, his progress was startling. He began to respond to questions, first with nods and small gestures, then with words. He regained the strength to sit up, then to stand with assistance, and within 3 weeks he was walking. The medical staff could not explain it. They reviewed his records, repeated their tests, and shook their heads. Recovery from such a state after so many months was rare, they admitted, but they offered no theory as to why it had happened. His wife didn't need their explanation. She had seen it with her own eyes, the way the salt baths seemed to call something back, the way each step of the ritual felt like weaving a thread between the body and the soul. Salt, in its purest form, is not just a mineral, it is a bridge, a conductor, a medium that can hold and transmit intention. When aligned with the cycles of the moon, itself a powerful regulator of water, tides, and subtle energies, it becomes more than the sum of its parts. The moon pulls on the waters of the earth, and we, being mostly water, are subject to that same pull. When the salt-infused water touches the body, especially during a lunar phase that supports renewal and return, it can act as a calling, a beacon for the soul to follow. In this case, the man's soul had not departed completely, but it had drifted, untethered enough, that his body could no longer express the presence of his mind. The salt, charged with life-affirming intention and magnified by the moon's influence, acted as a magnetic field, coaxing that presence back into its rightful place. It is not a matter of compelling the soul or forcing it against its will. It is about creating a field so aligned, so resonant with the frequency of wholeness, that the soul chooses to return, recognizing the body once more as home. The story spread quietly among those who understood such things. It wasn't treated as a miracle in the sense of something random or inexplicable, but as an example of what happens when the natural elements of Earth are engaged with awareness and precision. The salt was not magic by itself. The moon was not magic by itself. The blessing was not magic by itself. But together, structured salt, lunar timing, focused intention, they formed a complete circuit. And in that circuit, there was power enough to awaken what had been sleeping. Even after his recovery, the man continued to use the baths periodically, not as a necessity but as a way to maintain the strength of that connection. He spoke of feeling more present in his own skin afterward, more alert and grounded. His wife described the baths as reminders, both for him and for her, that the body and soul are not fixed together by chance, but by ongoing alignment. That alignment can be nurtured, strengthened, and, if lost, restored. The Lazarus effect, as some began to call it, was not about defying death, but about restoring life. It was about the recognition that our existence is not simply mechanical, not just the sum of biological processes. There is a thread of consciousness that weaves itself through the physical form, and that thread can stretch, fray, or loosen. The right conditions can draw it taut again. And sometimes, those conditions are as simple and as profound as a bath of blessed salt under the light of the moon. For those who witnessed it, the experience was transformative. It dissolved the boundaries between what they had been taught to think of as the possible and the impossible. It reminded them that the elements of the earth carry more than physical properties. They carry memory, frequency, and an ability to interact with the deepest layers of our being. And it affirmed that, under the right circumstances, the body can once again become a home the soul is willing to inhabit. This was not a story of defiance against fate, but of cooperation with the forces that shape life. It was a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary outcomes come not from resisting nature, but from working in harmony with it. And in the quiet glow of that seventh moonlit bath, when a voice long silent spoke again, it became clear that the distance between body and soul is not always final, and that the bridge between them may be built from something as simple as water, salt, and the light of the moon. There is a quiet intelligence in the natural world that often goes unnoticed, hidden in the simplest of forms. Salt, small and unassuming, seems like one of the most ordinary substances you could imagine. Yet within its crystalline structure lies a remarkable ability, the capacity to remember, to hold, and to transmit information. This is not merely poetic language. The science of the last few decades has begun to confirm something the ancients seemed to already know, that certain crystalline forms can store vast amounts of data and release it with perfect fidelity. What modern researchers are discovering in high-tech laboratories mirrors knowledge that has been preserved in sacred traditions for centuries. Salt, with its geometric precision and stable molecular arrangement, is far more than a seasoning or preservative. It is a vessel for memory, a physical archive capable of holding not only physical data, but the subtle imprint of thought and intention. In the realm of technology, scientists have learned to use crystals to store enormous volumes of information. Quartz, for instance, has been shown to hold terabytes of data in a space no larger than a coin, with stability projected to last billions of years. The process relies on the ordered structure of the crystal lattice, a repeating pattern of molecules that creates a stable environment for storing coded information. Salt, though far simpler in composition than quartz, shares a similar ordered geometry. Each grain is a cube, a repeating structure that can remain intact for centuries if undisturbed. In the microscopic spaces between its atoms, subtle changes in vibration can be impressed upon it, much like etching patterns into a record. These vibrations, whether introduced through sound, light, or even human intention, can linger, held in the orderly embrace of the crystal. For those who approach salt with conscious awareness, this means it can become more than a physical resource. It can be a carrier of energy, a holder of messages. Just as a hard drive stores files and recalls them when prompted, salt can be imprinted with specific intentions and release them back into the environment in which it is placed. This is why so many ancient rituals called for the blessing of salt before it was used in sacred ceremonies or healing practices. The act of blessing was not symbolic alone. It was a method of programming the crystalline lattice with a specific vibrational pattern, aligning the salt to serve a particular purpose. Whether that purpose was protection, purification, or healing, the salt would carry that encoded intention wherever it went. The process of storing intention in salt is not complicated, though it requires focus and clarity. Just as a recording device captures whatever sound is present, salt will absorb the energetic signature of the thoughts, emotions, and vibrations surrounding it. This is why rituals involving salt are often performed in quiet, focused settings, away from distractions or conflicting energies. The practitioner holds the salt, speaks or thinks the desired intention with as much precision as possible, and allows the energy of that thought to settle into the crystalline structure. Once the intention is embedded, the salt can be placed in a space, dissolved in water, or used in a ritual, releasing its stored frequency in a steady, gentle way. Modern experiments in water memory have shown that even water, a substance far less stable than salt, can hold the energetic signature of what it has been exposed to, influencing the way it behaves and interacts with other systems. Salt, with its rigid structure, is even better suited to retain these imprints over time. Some researchers studying mineral lattices have suggested that crystals can hold vibrational information indefinitely unless acted upon by a force strong enough to erase or overwrite it. This concept aligns with the way spiritual traditions have described salt for millennia, as something that does not lose its essence unless it is fundamentally altered. The storage capacity of salt is not limited to thoughts or words. Sound, light, and even subtle bioenergetic emissions can be impressed into its structure. In ceremonial use, chanting, singing, or even playing certain instruments near blessed salt is a way of layering additional frequencies into its lattice, enriching its vibrational memory. In healing work, salt placed near the body during meditation or prayer is believed to record the energetic state of the person, which can then be used to restore balance later when reintroduced into their environment. The salt becomes a kind of energetic snapshot, a frozen moment in crystalline form, ready to be released when needed. This idea, while extraordinary, is not without parallels in the physical sciences. In quantum computing, for example, the state of certain particles can be influenced and preserved, later recalled to perform complex calculations. Similarly, in holographic data storage, light patterns are imprinted into crystals and later reconstructed with remarkable accuracy. Salt operates on a humbler scale, but the principle is the same. It holds a pattern, a signature, until it is called upon to release it. One of the most fascinating aspects of salt's memory capacity is its ability to transmit what it has stored without the need for mechanical intervention. Unlike a digital device that must be plugged in and read by a machine, salt releases its imprint simply by existing in an environment. This release is subtle. It is not a broadcast in the way we think of radio waves, but rather a quiet emanation that influences the surrounding field. People sensitive to energy often describe a noticeable shift in the atmosphere of a room where blessed salt has been placed, even if they are unaware it is there. Plants may grow more vigorously, people may feel calmer, and the space may seem lighter or more peaceful. The potential for using salt in this way is vast. It can be placed in the corners of a home to maintain a protective frequency, used in meditation spaces to deepen spiritual connection, or dissolved in baths to transfer its stored intentions directly into the body through the skin. In some traditions, small pouches of blessed salt are carried as talismans, serving as constant reminders and reinforcements of the intentions placed within them. Over time, the salt continues to interact with the carrier's energy, strengthening the resonance of the original imprint. Of course, just as a recording can be erased, the memory within salt can be overwritten if it is exposed to conflicting energies. This is why many spiritual practitioners recommend replacing or re-blessing salt periodically. In doing so, the crystalline structure is cleared and refreshed, ready to receive new instructions. This is not unlike formatting a storage device before filling it with new data, ensuring that the signal is clean and free from interference. In the end, the true wonder of salt's memory capacity lies in its simplicity. Here is a substance so common that it sits unnoticed on kitchen tables, and yet it has the ability to hold the whisper of a prayer, the resonance of a song, the imprint of a moment of love or healing. It is as if the earth itself has given us a portable archive, a way to store and carry the unseen in physical form. And while modern science is only beginning to unravel the mechanics of this process, the wisdom of the past has already been quietly using it for centuries, proof that the smallest things can often hold the greatest mysteries. There is something extraordinary about the way your body produces salt in the form of tears. To most people, they are simply the body's response to strong emotion, an overflow of feeling that water alone could never express. But what if every tear you have ever shed carried not only water and salt, but an imprint of the exact emotion you were experiencing in that moment? What if the salt within those tears held a record, a vibrational signature unique to that instant in your life? It's easy to imagine salt as a constant, unchanging substance, but in truth, the salt your body creates is not identical from one moment to the next. Its crystalline structure forms in the presence of your emotional state, your thoughts, your intentions, and even your spiritual openness at the time. And that structure, like all crystalline forms, has the capacity to hold energy, to store information, to carry the invisible weight of feeling. When you cry tears of joy, the salt they contain carries a very different energetic charge than the salt of tears shed in grief or despair. Joyful tears are born in a body that is resonating with expansion, connection, and openness. The vibration of joy imprints itself onto the crystalline pattern of the salt as it forms, creating a kind of living record of abundance and love. In contrast, tears of sorrow are formed in the vibration of contraction, loss, and separation. They too hold a record, not of joy, but of pain, longing, and sometimes even the need for release. Both have value, both serve a purpose, but their energetic properties are not the same. They are like two different songs written in the same language, each carrying its own melody and meaning. If you have ever held back tears, you know the tension that builds in your body. That's because tears are not simply emotional expressions, they are also vehicles for energetic release. Your body uses them to move energy out of your system, to balance what has been building inside. When the salt in those tears leaves your body, it carries with it the vibration of what you are releasing. In the case of sorrow, this can be profoundly healing, like taking the weight from a wound so it can begin to close. In the case of joy, the release is not about removing pain, but about overflowing with the frequency of love and connection, so much so that it must spill out into the physical world. This is one of the reasons many ancient cultures saw tears as sacred offerings. They understood that tears were not just water from the eyes, but a crystallized form of the soul's expression. Some traditions even collected tears in small glass or clay vessels during moments of great joy or deep grief, believing that the salt they contained held the energy of that moment forever. They knew that if salt could preserve food, it could also preserve the essence of feeling, not in a metaphorical way, but as an actual vibrational imprint. The energetic properties of salt produced in tears can also influence how we manifest. Manifestation is not just about asking for what you want, it is about aligning your energy with the frequency of what you desire. Joyful tears naturally carry a vibration closer to that frequency because they are formed in an expanded, receptive state. This is why moments of deep gratitude or happiness often seem to coincide with sudden breakthroughs or blessings. In those moments, your body is literally producing physical matter, salt crystals in your tears, that are resonating with abundance. That vibration doesn't disappear when the tears dry. It lingers in your energy field, reinforcing the alignment between you and your desired reality. On the other hand, tears of sorrow are not inherently negative. While they may not directly align you with abundance in the way joyful tears do, they serve as a cleansing process. They help you shed the energetic weight that could block your ability to receive. Think of them as clearing the space. When you release grief through tears, the salt within them is carrying away the frequency of that grief, freeing your energy field from the heaviness of holding it inside. This makes room for new frequencies to enter, for hope to return, for joy to find its way back in. There is also a fascinating difference in the way people feel after crying from joy compared to crying from sadness. After joyful tears, there is often a sense of lightness, even euphoria, as if the body has amplified and shared something beautiful with the world. After sorrowful tears, there can be a deep stillness, a feeling of emptiness that is not always comfortable but is necessary, because emptiness is the space in which new life can grow. In both cases, the salt in your tears has done its work. It has carried the message of your emotions into the physical world, where it becomes part of the greater exchange between you and the universe. If you were to take the salt from tears of joy and place it in water, blessing it with intention, you would be amplifying the vibration of that joy. The water would carry the crystalline imprint of happiness, gratitude and connection, and when consumed or used in ritual, it could serve as a powerful tool for manifestation. Likewise, if you were to take the salt from tears of sorrow and bless it with the intention of transformation, you could transmute its vibration into one of strength and renewal. This is not symbolic. It is the direct result of altering the vibrational programming of the salt through conscious intention, just as you would bless any other natural substance. The salt in tears is unique in another way. It is born from within you, carrying not only the universal patterns of crystalline geometry, but also the deeply personal frequency of your own energy field. It is both universal and individual, both a reflection of the collective human experience and an intimate record of your own journey. This is why tears can feel so vulnerable. On some level, we know we are offering a piece of ourselves each time we cry, whether to another person, to the earth, or to the unseen forces that witness our lives. When we speak about emotional healing, we often focus on the mental and psychological aspects, but there is a physical, energetic process happening as well. Tears are one of the body's most direct ways of moving energy from the inner world to the outer world. The salt they contain is like a tiny vessel carrying the message of what we have felt, allowing it to be released, transformed, or amplified. If we were to see our tears this way, we might treat them differently. We might give ourselves more permission to cry when we need to, knowing that it is not a weakness, but a deeply intelligent act of self-healing. And if we are intentional, we can even use tears as part of our spiritual practice. The next time you cry from joy, you could hold those tears in your awareness as a gift, a direct expression of alignment with the frequency of love and abundance. The next time you cry from sorrow, you could see those tears as a cleansing rain, washing your inner world so that new life can grow. In both cases, the salt is not just a byproduct of the emotion, it is the crystallized form of the energy you are moving, a record of your journey, and a bridge between the unseen and the physical. This understanding brings new meaning to the phrase, salt of the earth. Your own salt, the salt you create in your tears, is one of the purest expressions of who you are in a given moment. It carries the truth of your heart in crystalline form. It reminds you that emotions are not abstract or fleeting. They leave tangible imprints in the physical world, imprints that can be released, transformed, or used to create something new. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds you that joy and sorrow are not enemies. They are two currents in the same river, each shaping you, each leaving behind its own sacred salt to guide your path forward. Across the world, long before the age of modern science, salt was recognized not merely as a tool for survival, but as a sacred element woven into the spiritual and cultural life of countless civilizations. To study its presence across traditions is to see a pattern emerge, a universal understanding that salt is more than a seasoning or preservative. It is a purifier, a protector, a bridge between the human and the divine. This understanding is preserved in ancient rituals, many of which remain alive today, and their similarities across time and geography suggest that salt carries a timeless message that humanity has never truly forgotten. In the arid lands surrounding the Dead Sea, the presence of salt was unavoidable. The dense, mineral-rich waters and the crystallized formations along its shores gave rise to a unique reverence for this substance. The Dead Sea Scrolls, among the most important archaeological discoveries in history, contain references to purification rites that involved salt. In the sectarian communities that produced these scrolls, salt was not just a material to be gathered, it was a participant in the sacred. It was used in ceremonial baths, where initiates immersed themselves, allowing the salt-rich water to draw out not only physical impurities but what they considered spiritual residue that clung to the soul. The geometric crystals themselves were seen as divine architecture, and the waters that birthed them were treated as living scripture, a mirror of heaven's order imprinted in earthly form. Far to the east, high in the mountains where the air is thin and the earth folds in on itself, vast veins of rose-colored Himalayan salt have been locked within the rock for millions of years. These ancient formations, believed to be remnants of primordial oceans, were prized by the people of the region not just for their taste or preservation qualities, but for their vitality. In certain Tibetan and Himalayan spiritual practices, salt was ground into fine powder and used to draw protective symbols on the ground before prayer or meditation. These lines and shapes were believed to form barriers against unseen forces, keeping the sacred space pure and undisturbed. In other instances, Himalayan salt was used in offerings to the mountain spirits, a gift to the guardians of the land, exchanged for safe passage, abundant harvests, or favorable weather. The deep, pink hue of this salt was considered significant, symbolizing life force and grounding energy, making it ideal for rituals that sought to anchor spiritual insight into physical reality. In the Americas, among native tribes whose lands stretched from the plains to the coasts, salt was often a central part of ceremonial life. Some southwestern tribes journeyed for days to reach sacred salt lakes, bringing back the mineral not only for sustenance but for use in healing and protection rites. The act of collecting the salt was itself a ritual, often preceded by fasting or prayer. In some traditions, salt was mixed with herbs and sacred ashes to create powerful medicine bundles, which were carried by healers or hung in homes to ensure balance and ward off negative influences. During certain dances or seasonal ceremonies, lines of salt were poured along the edges of the ritual space, forming a perimeter that separated the everyday world from the sacred one. It was understood that within those boundaries, communication with the spirit world would be clearer, and the participants' energy would be shielded from harmful intrusion. Despite the distance and differences between these cultures, the themes in their salt rituals are strikingly similar. In each, salt is linked to purification, protection, and the maintenance of a sacred connection between humans and the unseen. Whether dissolved in water for bathing, sprinkled in lines to define a sacred space, or offered to the spirits as a token of gratitude, salt serves as both a physical and energetic tool. It is not only used to cleanse what is unwanted, but also to hold and preserve what is precious. The belief that salt can carry intention, that it can remember the prayer, the blessing, or the promise spoken over it, appears again and again, even in cultures that had no contact with one another. In Japan, a tradition known as shio mamori, or salt protection, continues to this day. Small packets of purified salt are placed at doorways, carried in pockets, or tucked into vehicles to ward off misfortune. At Shinto shrines, piles of salt are placed at entrances to invite purity and repel disruptive energy. This practice mirrors the protective salt lines of Native American ceremonies, showing how cultures separated by oceans still recognized salt as a guardian material. Similarly, in parts of Africa, salt has long been used in blessings for newborns, symbolizing both the preservation of life and the grounding of the child's spirit in the community. Even in Europe, echoes of these beliefs remain. In rural areas, salt was scattered across thresholds and windowsills to prevent unwanted spirits from entering the home. In Eastern Orthodox Christian traditions, salt is sometimes blessed and shared during special feasts, linking it to both covenant and protection. These practices may appear simple, even quaint, but they speak to an enduring understanding that salt carries with it the power to influence the unseen as well as the tangible. What is most compelling is how these rituals parallel one another in method and meaning. Whether it was the Essenes bathing in Dead Sea brine, Himalayan villagers drawing salt circles, or native healers crafting bundles infused with salt's essence, the core idea is the same. Salt can hold a vibration and act upon it. It is an agent of alignment, returning what has strayed to its rightful order. Its crystalline structure, so precise and enduring, makes it a perfect vessel for intention, and the human instinct to use it in this way appears to transcend culture and time. Even today, in a world dominated by modern conveniences and technologies, salt retains this quiet role as a spiritual ally. It sits in kitchens and on dining tables, yet in the hands of those who remember, it is still blessed before it is used, still sprinkled to protect, still dissolved in water to cleanse. The rituals may have been adapted to new contexts, but their roots remain in the same ancient soil. Salt has always been a companion in humanity's spiritual journey, a constant presence in moments of offering, purification, and sacred exchange. When you trace the thread of salt rituals across continents and centuries, you find not only a shared reverence for this mineral but a shared understanding of its role as a bridge. It connects the physical with the spiritual, the human with the divine, the present with the eternal. It reminds us that the tools for transformation are often simple, close at hand, and overlooked, until we learn to see them again for what they truly are. Salt, in all its forms, has been carrying this message for millennia, waiting, perhaps, for us to listen. It is easy to think of the physical and spiritual realms as being separate, as if there is a wall between them, one world made of matter, the other made of something unseen. But the truth is, there are bridges everywhere, subtle connections that allow energy, information, and consciousness to pass between the two. Most of the time, we move across these bridges without realizing it. A dream that feels more real than waking life, a sudden intuition that arrives without reason, a moment where the air shifts and you feel the presence of something beyond the physical, these are signs you have stepped, even briefly, into that space between worlds. Among the many natural elements that can assist in making this crossing more deliberate, salt holds a special place. Not because of superstition, but because of its structure, its memory, and its ability to carry intention across vibrational boundaries. Salt is more than a mineral. It is a form of matter that is both stable and receptive. Its crystalline lattice, perfectly ordered, makes it an ideal medium for holding and transmitting energy. When used with awareness, salt can act like a tuning fork, aligning the dense frequencies of the physical body with the finer, faster vibrations of the spiritual realms. This is not just metaphor. Those who have worked deeply with salt describe a measurable difference in their perception when it is used with intention. Colors appear more vivid, intuition sharpens, and the subtle impressions of other times and places become easier to sense. It is as though the salt strengthens the signal between two stations, removing the static that usually clouds the connection. This is why salt has been used in sacred work across so many cultures, not only for protection or purification, but for enhancing the ability to perceive what lies beyond the limits of ordinary sight. In certain meditative practices, a small amount of salt placed in water and set near the body acts as an energetic amplifier. As you enter a trance-like state, the salt seems to anchor you just enough in the physical realm to keep you steady, while simultaneously extending your awareness into the spiritual field. This anchoring is essential. Without it, venturing too far into altered states can leave you ungrounded, drifting, or unable to fully integrate what you perceive. Salt becomes the bridge, holding you in both worlds at once. There are accounts of people using salt to deepen their psychic abilities, particularly clairvoyance and clairaudience. The process is often simple: a pinch of pure, unprocessed salt held in the palm or placed beneath the tongue before entering meditation. The salt is blessed beforehand, charged with the intention to open the inner senses and connect to truth without distortion. Those who practice in this way report that impressions come more quickly, with greater clarity, and with a sense of solidity, as if the information they are receiving has been grounded in reality rather than drifting through imagination. Salt's structure appears to act as a stabilizer, giving form to the subtle patterns of energy that psychic perception relies on. Past life recall is another area where salt's bridging power comes into play. The memories of other lifetimes do not exist in the conscious mind. They are stored in the deeper layers of the soul's experience, what some call the Akashic field. Accessing them requires both a release from the tight boundaries of present identity and a tether that allows you to return safely to the now. Salt, with its ability to hold vibrational memory, can serve as that tether. In guided sessions, practitioners sometimes place a bowl of salt water within reach of the person seeking recall. As the journey begins, the salt holds the intention of safe passage between lifetimes. When the person's awareness begins to move backward through time, the salt serves as a point of resonance with the physical body, keeping the link between the self in the present and the self being remembered. The experiences that come from this are often more vivid than dreams, sights, sounds, even physical sensations from other eras and other bodies arise, as if they were happening in the present moment. Yet the person remains aware of their physical surroundings, able to return at will. This is the mark of a true bridge, not an escape into another world, but a connection that allows travel while maintaining presence. The salt seems to preserve the line of energy between the here and the elsewhere, between the now and the then. The idea that a simple mineral could facilitate such profound crossings might seem unlikely, but when you understand the nature of vibration, it becomes less mysterious. Everything that exists vibrates at a certain frequency. The physical realm operates at a slower, denser vibration, while the spiritual realm vibrates at a much higher frequency. To move between them, you need something that can resonate with both. Salt, because of its crystalline perfection and its deep connection to the waters of the earth, can do exactly that. It is grounded enough to belong fully to the physical world, but its structure is refined enough to harmonize with higher frequencies. In this way, it becomes a natural point of contact between the two. Blessing the salt before using it is not just ritual for its own sake. The blessing imprints the salt with a specific frequency, like setting the coordinates on a map. If your intention is to connect with guidance, the salt becomes programmed to hold the vibration of clarity and truth. If your intention is to recall a past life, the salt is charged with the frequency of safe passage and accurate memory. Because salt's structure is stable, it can hold that programming without distortion, maintaining the bridge exactly as it was set until the work is complete. Over time, those who work regularly with salt in this way often notice an increase in their baseline sensitivity. Psychic impressions become easier to access, meditation becomes deeper, and synchronicities in daily life occur more frequently. It is as though the repeated use of the bridge has strengthened the connection, making the passage between physical and spiritual less effortful. This doesn't mean the bridge is always open, boundaries are still necessary, but it does mean that the act of crossing becomes more familiar, more natural. There is also a protective quality to this process. Just as a bridge in the physical world can be guarded, the bridge formed by salt is not open to anything and everything. The blessing and intention act as gatekeepers, allowing only those energies and impressions that match the programmed frequency to pass through. This ensures that the connection remains clear and that the experiences gained are constructive rather than chaotic. Perhaps most fascinating is the way salt can help integrate what is learned on the other side of the bridge. It is one thing to glimpse a vision, hear a message, or remember another lifetime. It is another to bring that information back and apply it in a meaningful way. Salt's grounding nature helps anchor these insights into the physical mind, preventing them from fading like dreams upon waking. The memory of the experience remains sharper, and the lessons can be woven into daily life. In this way, salt becomes more than a simple bridge, it becomes a tool for transformation. It allows you to touch the infinite while keeping your feet firmly planted on the earth. It gives form to the formless, carries the whispers of the unseen into the tangible, and allows you to travel between worlds without losing yourself in either. And perhaps that is its greatest gift, the reminder that the boundary between the physical and spiritual is not a wall, but a threshold. A threshold you can cross at will, if you know how to find the bridge, and if you have the wisdom to return carrying the light of what you have seen. There is a certain point on the spiritual path where knowledge must become practice. It is not enough to understand salt as a symbol or even as a subtle energetic tool. It must be brought into daily life in a conscious, intentional way. When used with purpose, salt can be more than a seasoning or preservative. It can be a steady companion in your growth, a medium through which the body and spirit communicate more clearly, and a means of aligning your personal vibration with the rhythms of the universe. What follows are ways to work with salt that are both practical and deeply rooted in the principles that have been preserved in sacred traditions, methods that turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. One of the simplest and most powerful practices is meditation with salt. This is not about holding a salt shaker in your hands, but working with unrefined, pure crystals, sea salt, rock salt, or Himalayan salt. Before beginning, the salt should be placed in a small bowl and set where it can catch natural light, preferably sunlight in the morning or moonlight in the evening. The light charges the crystals, amplifying their natural ability to hold and transmit intention. When you sit to meditate, place the bowl in front of you, or hold a small amount of salt in your palms. Begin by focusing on your breath, Then allow your attention to rest on the sensation of the salt, its weight, its texture, its coolness. Imagine that the crystalline structure before you is a mirror of your own inner clarity. With each inhale, see yourself drawing in that clarity, and with each exhale, release anything that feels clouded or heavy. Over time, this practice can become a way to anchor yourself quickly into a state of openness and receptivity, as the salt's stability helps steady your own energy. Blessing rituals are another way to invite salt into your spiritual practice. At its core, blessing salt is about imprinting it with a specific intention. Begin with clean, unprocessed salt, the more natural and untouched, the better. Place it in a small, dedicated bowl or vessel. Stand or sit before it with a clear mind and an open heart. Speak your intention aloud, whether it is for protection, healing, clarity, or connection. If words do not feel right, hold the intention as an image or a feeling in your mind. Imagine it flowing from your thoughts into the salt, filling each crystal with your purpose. Some choose to pass their hands over the salt in slow, sweeping motions, visualizing light pouring into it. Others prefer to breathe gently over it, allowing their breath to carry the essence of the intention into the mineral. Once blessed, the salt can be sprinkled in a home, carried in a small pouch, dissolved in water for ritual cleansing, or kept in a sacred space to continue emanating the vibration it holds. The key is to work with it consciously, remembering that it is a living participant in your spiritual life, not an inert substance. The timing of certain salt practices can be amplified by aligning them with natural cycles, particularly the phases of the moon. Lunar-timed salt baths are one of the most potent ways to combine salt's properties with the shifting energies of the moon. The basic idea is simple. You fill a bath with warm water, add a generous handful of natural salt, and soak. But the timing and intention change the nature of the experience. During the new moon, a salt bath can be used for clearing and renewal, washing away the residue of the past cycle and creating space for what is to come. During the full moon, the bath becomes a vessel for charging and amplification, drawing in the energy of illumination and abundance. To deepen the effect, you can bless the salt before adding it to the water, speaking your intention into it and allowing the crystals to carry that energy into the bath. As you soak, imagine the salt extracting any heaviness or imbalance from your body, while also infusing you with the clarity and light you've called in. Some practitioners take this a step further by combining lunar timing with specific herbs or oils that complement their intention. For example, rosemary and salt during a full moon can enhance clarity and protection, while lavender and salt during a waning moon can support release and rest. The point is not to create a rigid formula but to learn to listen to both your own needs and the rhythm of the natural world, allowing the salt to act as a bridge between them. Daily micro-practices with salt can also be surprisingly effective for maintaining spiritual alignment. A pinch of blessed salt dissolved in a morning glass of water can be taken as a reminder of your connection to your higher self. A small dish of salt placed by your bedside can act as an energetic filter during sleep, absorbing discordant vibrations and keeping your dream space clear. Sprinkling salt at thresholds or windowsills can help maintain the sanctity of your home, marking it as a place of peace and safety. These are small acts, but their cumulative effect can be profound, especially when performed with intention. One of the deeper aspects of working with salt is understanding that it is not only a cleansing agent, but also a preserver. Just as it keeps food from spoiling, it can hold the vibration of a spiritual insight or a moment of deep connection, preserving it within its crystalline form. Some choose to keep a small jar of salt in their meditation space and add to it over time, blessing it after particularly meaningful sessions or breakthroughs. This living salt becomes a record of their journey, infused with layers of personal growth and understanding. Over months or years, it develops a resonance that can be felt simply by being in its presence, a subtle but powerful reminder of the path traveled. In all of these practices, the essential element is mindfulness. Salt does not demand elaborate rituals or ornate settings to be effective. Its power lies in its simplicity and in the clarity with which you approach it. When you hold salt in your hands with a clear purpose, you are engaging with something ancient, a substance that has witnessed the birth and transformation of worlds, a mineral that carries the memory of oceans and the geometry of the stars. By bringing it into your spiritual practice with intention, you are aligning yourself with that same enduring stability and openness. Ultimately, working with salt for spiritual growth is not about superstition or blind tradition. It is about entering into a conscious relationship with one of the Earth's purest and most stable forms, allowing it to reflect and support your own stability, clarity, and growth. Whether through meditation, blessing rituals, lunar baths, or simple daily acts, these protocols are not meant to bind you to a rigid practice, but to invite you into deeper awareness. Over time, salt becomes more than something you use. It becomes a quiet, steady presence in your life, an anchor, a mirror, and a bridge, guiding you toward a deeper connection with yourself and with the unseen currents that move through all things. You have always known. Somewhere deep inside you, beyond the noise of everyday life and the endless distractions of the modern world, there has always been a quiet pull, a sense that the ordinary things around you are not so ordinary after all. Salt has been sitting in your home, on your table, in your food, as if it were nothing more than seasoning. Yet it has been there, patiently waiting for you to remember. Not as a relic of superstition, not as a symbol locked away in ancient rituals, but as a living ally, a bridge, a key. A crystallized reminder of why you are here, of the purpose you carried with you before you even took your first breath. It is easy to forget. The world trains you to see only the surface of things. It teaches you to value convenience over connection, to replace the sacred with the synthetic, to believe that the tools for transformation must be hidden in some far-off temple or expensive retreat. But the truth is much simpler, and far more humbling. The reminder of your divine purpose can be held between your fingers, it dissolves on your tongue, it moves through your blood, and flows with your tears. Salt is not just a part of you, it is a thread woven through the tapestry of your being, connecting body, mind, and soul in a pattern as ancient as creation itself. When you touch salt, you are touching structure. When you taste it, you are tasting the memory of oceans older than human history. When you bless it, you awaken its ability to speak, not in words, but in vibration. And when you use it with intention, you step into a partnership with a force that has always been here to guide you back to alignment. Salt remembers the shape of divine order, and it will share that memory with you if you ask. It will remind your body of balance, your mind of clarity, your soul of its reason for being here. But it cannot do this if you treat it as lifeless, as nothing more than flavor. You must meet it halfway. This is the call to remember, to pick up the tools you have been given and use them as they were meant to be used, to reclaim salt from the realm of the mundane and return it to the place of reverence it once held. This is not nostalgia for a lost age, it is a necessity for the one we are entering now. The disconnection so many feel, from themselves, from each other, from the earth, is not accidental. It is the result of forgetting, of losing the daily practices that kept us in rhythm with the larger order of life. Salt can help you remember that rhythm, it can tune you to it again. Think of how many times you have consumed salt without thinking, without honoring it, without recognizing that in that moment you were interacting with a living record of creation. Think of how many blessings have gone unspoken, how many opportunities for alignment have been passed over. You cannot change those moments, but you can change the ones that come next. You can choose to see salt for what it truly is, a crystallized thread running between worlds, carrying the imprint of the divine from the heart of the earth into your very cells. When you bless salt, you are not just altering a mineral, you are altering yourself. You are declaring to the universe that you are ready to remember, ready to align, ready to participate fully in the life you came here to live. You are telling your body to hold the frequency of health. You are telling your mind to hold the frequency of truth. You are telling your soul to hold the frequency of purpose. And in doing so, you are calling all parts of yourself back into harmony. This is not about ritual for ritual's sake. It is about reclaiming your ability to work with the building blocks of life in a conscious way. It is about remembering that the divine is not separate from the physical, it is expressed through it. Salt is proof of that. It is a physical substance with the ability to hold the vibration of the unseen, to bridge what is eternal with what is temporary. And every time you work with it intentionally, you are reinforcing that bridge within yourself. You were not placed here to stumble through life in disconnection. You came with a purpose, a unique note in the song of creation that only you can sing. But in a world designed to distract, it is easy to lose your voice, to forget the melody. Salt is one of the ways you can find it again. It carries the memory of harmony in its structure, and when you align yourself with it, that harmony begins to flow through you. You start to remember who you are, why you came, and what you are here to do. There is urgency in this remembering. The times we are living in demand clarity, presence, and alignment. They demand that we wake from the sleep of disconnection and step fully into our roles as conscious participants in creation. The earth is shifting, the energy is accelerating, and those who remember will be the ones who guide the way forward. But you cannot guide others if you are still lost to yourself. The call is not to wait for someone else to show you, it is to take the first step now. The salt in your kitchen is not separate from the salt in your body. The salt in your body is not separate from the salt in the oceans. The salt in the oceans is not separate from the pulse of the planet. And the pulse of the planet is not separate from the heartbeat of creation itself. It is all connected, and you are part of that connection. This is the thread you are being asked to follow, from the grain of salt in your hand, all the way back to the source of life. So take it up, hold it in your palm, see it for what it is, a fragment of the divine, solidified into form so that you could touch it, taste it, and remember. Bless it with the vibration of your highest intention. Let it dissolve into water, and drink it with the awareness that you are not just hydrating your body, you are aligning with the blueprint of your soul. Use it to cleanse your space, your energy, your thoughts. Carry it with you as a reminder that the sacred is never far away. It is here, in the smallest of things, waiting for you to see it. This is not a metaphor. This is a practice. It is a choice you can make today, and tomorrow, and for the rest of your life. Every time you do, you strengthen the bridge between your body, your mind, and your soul. Every time you do, you weave yourself more tightly into the pattern of purpose you came here to fulfill. And one day, when you look back, you will see that the act of remembering was not a single moment, but 1,000 small choices, each one calling you home. The call is here. It is not faint, it is not distant, it is ringing through the very salt in your blood. Answer it. Reclaim what has always been yours. Remember who you are. And then live as though you never forgot.